Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, OP noticed changes in his wife's behavior. He discovered she was sexting multiple men and planning to leave him. Confronted with evidence, she initially denied everything but later admitted to her actions. She left the family home but later tried to reconcile, only to be rejected. The divorce was finalized with terms that allowed her to see the kids but did not restore their marriage. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I worked our own home business together, cooking chicken wings and a few other specialties in our little food trailer. We travel with our 3 kids all over the country. As far as we felt like going to get to big festivals and places, we could stay and work for a few days or even a few weeks at a time. We met 15 years ago at a local birthday hoedown for a mutual friend of ours. For me, it was pretty much love at first sight. I asked her to dance, and we ended up dancing most of the time together. We both wanted to start our own family business and have exactly 3 kids. She had great ideas and gave me the impression that nothing could stop her. During our business launch, I fell in love with her even more. She was extremely thoughtful, focused, and talented, and really nice to look at. She supported my ideas and helped me build our food trailer from scratch. She helped me to stay on track if I ever felt any doubt. We thrived at the food trailer business, but after doing it for several years with all 3 kids, we decided it was time for a change. We started buying rundown houses and flipping them for a profit. This was the ideal career for us. Although I was more of a handyman and she was more focused on homeschooling the kids, we still worked together and shared each responsibility. Our RV was like a home base, and whatever house we were working on became a secondary home until it was time to take on the next one. After our youngest turned 5, I noticed a change in my wife. She started playing games on her phone and messaging more people. She said she was chatting with other moms in the city, trying to plan play dates for our kids. I bought this excuse for a while, but a month passed with her typing away on her phone, and she never left the house with the kids. She left a few times by herself to visit her elderly father 2 hours away. While she was in the bathroom one night, I instinctively checked her phone for the first time. I could not believe what I read. She was sexting and talking to some guy. But the more I read, the more I was certain this was a fake account. I wanted to share photos, and I was devastated to see photos of her most intimate parts. No part of her was left to the imagination. My heart started racing and my vision started blurring. My hands were trembling as I realized I was going to have to divorce my wife. I opened the bathroom door and told her she was cheating on me. She said no, but I showed her the messages. Her jaw dropped, and it looked like her soul retracted into her body as she was left with an autopilot stare. I asked her who the heck this was. She returned to the surface and told me it was probably a fake person that was making it look like she replied to them and said those things when she never actually did. I showed her the pictures of her own body and she retracted again, looking ghostly pale. Then I read her one message where she named me as her husband and said I had become so boring to her that she wished she could leave me for AP, but she couldn't because she didn't want to lose the kids. I paused to see her reaction, and there was nothing. I kept reading on to where they talked about her secretly filing for divorce and custody before leaving in the middle of the night with the kids. She opened her mouth, but she closed it again. Her face started turning red, and she finally told me she was sorry and that everything on her phone was just talk. She didn't mean anything she said, and it only made her feel good to pretend she was serious about them. I asked her what she meant by them, and that's when she retracted into her body again. I went through her other messages and found that months ago she was talking to a completely different guy in the same manner before he ghosted her. Another guy rejected her advancement, claiming he was married before blocking her. I looked her in the eyes and told her she was married too, but not for long. She started begging me not to file for divorce, reminding me that she loved me and the kids would be devastated. I told her at least I was decent enough to warn her instead of filing in secret, and then kicking her out in the middle of the night. We argued back and forth for hours. After crying, she resorted to yelling, and after I told her to get out, she became angry and bitter with me, even though this was all her fault. She called AP and told him what was going on. She packed her bags and tried to start packing the kids' bags. I told her not to wake them up in the middle of the night and take them from their home. I told her if she won custody in court, I would let her have them, but they needed time to adjust to this and process it. She must have agreed with me because she left without even waking them up to say goodbye. I couldn't believe how easy it was for my wife to leave our home and family that night. A few hours passed before she called me, sobbing. She told me he wasn't the person he said he was, and she needed me to forgive her now, more than ever. I told her I would never forgive her for this, and she wasn't welcome back. I hung up on her and tried to keep her out. But she still managed to get inside, and I knew the police wouldn't make her leave because her name was on the mortgage too. So, I told her she had to sleep in the spare room and leave me alone completely. I told her she could continue schooling the kids until the divorce was final. She accepted my terms because she was at my mercy. In the months leading up to the court hearing, she was trying so hard to get me back and be the perfect wife. She didn't use her phone the entire time, and the night before the hearing, she tried to seduce me. I'm proud to say it didn't work. I knew she was only doing it because AP didn't turn out to be the person she thought he was. She was ordered to leave my house without alimony payments, and she could only get visitation with the kids on my terms. It was exactly how I had hoped it would go, and I try every day to remain strong as a single father. When I was ready, I allowed my wife to continue schooling the kids in the RV. She does it, and every day, she hopes I'll take her back as my wife. I always tell her when pigs fly. Today's second story. In this story, OP discovers his wife is having an affair after finding explicit mail addressed to another man. Confronting both her and her lover, he learns their cheating had been ongoing for months. Heartbroken, he files for divorce and later finds happiness with a new partner, realizing he's better off without her. Now let's get into the story. I know this happened over 20 years ago, but I can't help but want to share this. I was married to my wife Lily in my mid-30s. She was 33 then, and we were a basic family who had the bare minimum. No kids, which I was grateful for. She wanted a new kitchen, and that meant one thing: longer hours at work for me, and barely enough time to be home when she got back from school. She was a school teacher, by the way. I thought getting her what she wanted was going to make her happier, but it didn't. Instead, she would barely look at me while I tried conversing with her, and she answered with curt nods when I asked questions. It went on like this for weeks. I was coming back tired to my distant wife. One day at work, I began to sweat profusely even when it was less than 20 degrees outside. My coworker, who happened to see me rub my eyes to clear my blurry vision, insisted I go home. I had painkillers to help me get my head together before climbing into my truck and driving home. This was the first time in months that I was going home early. It was going to surprise Lily. I parked my truck out front when I realized she wasn't back yet. By the time I was heading for the door, I noticed there was mail in the box. I was never the one to check the mail because my wife got home before I did, but this mail caught my attention. I grabbed it and checked who it was for. It was an address not too far away and within the city, with our return address, and the sender was Lily. It was natural to ignore the mail knowing she was always sending something like this, but then I found it weird that the recipient's address was still in this town, not too far from where I lived. My curiosity got the best of me and I opened it up, especially because the envelope was painted pink and had faint cute hearts sprinkled on it. It wasn't anything you'd send a serious letter in. Alarm bells in my head were already going off and the dizziness I felt earlier at work washed away. My finger pulled at the print inside and my heart broke at what I saw. Nudes. They were nudes. Her nudes. That wasn't all. There was a handwritten letter telling the recipient to enjoy. With my blood boiling and my head hot, I closed it up and studied the address again. Knowing the place was a few streets away, I climbed into my truck. I finally found the apartment clean and freshly painted. I stayed in my truck watching to see if anyone was in when right at that moment a new car pulled up to the driveway. The man, who I guess is the owner, stepped out and I followed with the mail in hand. The man turned to me in confusion. Pretending to be delivering a package, I handed the mail to him, and in 3 seconds, when he realized who it was from, his eyes widened. It surprised me how calm I was. No fist throwing, no tongue lashing, just a straight stare at the man in front of me. I noticed the woman on the other side of the door watching us curiously. His wife, I suppose. Assuring him I wouldn't make a scene, I told him to come with me, and he obliged with no hesitation, giving his wife the excuse of going to see a friend and entering my truck. I stopped by a phone booth along the way and called Lily. She was back home, and from the sound in the background, I could tell she was making her special tea. I gave her the news of an emergency and told her that she should meet me at her parents' house. Her instant response was expected, and I hung up. Heading back to the car, I drove up to her parents' house without saying a word to the man having an affair with Lily. By the time I rounded up at her parents' house, Lily had just arrived. It wasn't subtle. Her reaction, her mouth fell open as she saw the man next to me. Her parents, who had just stepped outside, found us and were confused by what was going on. I told the man to hand the mail over to her parents and explain himself. It didn't take too long for my wife to start crying. She tried to explain, but her sobs made it hard for her. The man she was having an affair with understood that the jade was up and explained that this had been going on for months. They had met at a parent-teacher meeting in school, and he had shown interest in her, even knowing she was married. Lily never tried to turn him down. Instead, she bathed in his attention and made it something more. Her parents were stunned by the information. Lily was already clinging to my shirt crying, but I brushed her off. I couldn't believe that she would betray me like this, so I told her to stay with her parents. She started crying harder, begging me not to do this to our family. Her parents were extremely upset, asking me to reconsider and trying to console their daughter. But I just left. I left the AP with the phone. Them too. I wonder what they did to him after I left, because her dad was looking murderous. A few days later, I filed for a divorce and sent it over to her for signing. Her parents kept on calling, as did Lily, and she kept sending me mail by morning and evening delivery in the same pink envelopes she sent AP nudes to. That's when I realized she was just incredibly dumb. I found the AP's phone number from the directory and called his wife to tell her about everything that happened between Lily and her husband. I don't know what she did with that piece of information. Some months later, my divorce was finalized. A few years down the line, I met a wonderful woman who I married and started a family with. I don't regret leaving my ex one bit, because I would not have the life I have today had I not. Do not ever stay with a cheating spouse. Today's third story. In this story, OP and his wife set up by mutual friends, married, and started a family. However, he discovered his wife was having an affair with her best friend's husband. Both couples divorced, leading the exes to form a new relationship. As chaos ensued for his ex-wife, he focused on being a devoted father to their daughter. Now let's get into the story. I-39 was set up with my wife, who was 40, by a mutual friend. The friend in question was her best friend while I knew her, because I was good friends with her brother, and her to an extent. Despite being in similar circles, the two of us had never met or even knew of each other. At the time, I was going through a bit of a dry spell when it came to dating, so I decided to accept the blind date, because why not? If it worked out, then great, but if it didn't work out, then so be it. I'd move on with my life, and the woman I was supposed to be going out with would as well. The date went well enough, and we agreed to go on a second date, followed by a third, a fourth, and well, you get the idea? Admittedly, it might have been a bit of a whirlwind romance, because the two of us were considering marriage as early as 6 months in. I know it sounds crazy, but the two of us got along well. We had a lot in common, and never once did I feel forced when having a conversation with her. It always came naturally to us. So, when I decided that I was going to propose about 8 months in, it didn't seem to be a surprise to anyone. My family was a little hesitant at first and asked me if perhaps this wasn't too rushed, but at the very least, they were supportive of me. The same went for my wife's family. After we got married, we moved into a house my family was nice enough to give us. It had been in the family for a while, so it wasn't like we were rich or anything. Whichever child managed to get married first is whoever got the house. It sounds cruel, but there were no hard feelings when it came to this plan from any of my siblings. The two of us moved into the house and started doing what all newlyweds did: build a life together. About a year after getting married, my wife discovered she was pregnant, and we then added a baby girl to the household. Newborns can add a lot of stress to a relationship, and our daughter did. But we were managing to make it work, just like we were in our whirlwind romance to marriage. When her best friend got married, the two of us started going out on double dates with the two of them. It was nice because my wife and I didn't exactly have a lot of married friends to hang out with. Thinking back, I realized we mostly had single friends, but that happens sometimes when you get married young. A lot of people choose to wait and get married in their 30s. I always got along with my wife's best friend, and her husband was no different. Like us, they seemed like a great fit. They wanted a family but weren't going to try yet because the two of them wanted to focus on their careers first. For the first few years of marriage, things seemed great. I don't think I even realized something was off because my wife was so good at saving face and keeping up the charade. Looking back at it now, I realized that this is the case. The one who pointed it out to me was my wife's best friend. She came to me one day, saying that she noticed her husband being very secretive lately. When she spied on him, she realized that the person he was talking to was none other than her best friend and my wife. It was hard to tell what they were saying most of the time, but she did hear a few inappropriate things come out of her husband's mouth, followed by a giggle from my wife on the other line. I didn't want to deal with it at first and tried to come up with a bunch of reasons or excuses why she could have heard what she heard. The problem is, I couldn't come up with anything logical to explain what my wife's best friend was telling me. I decided to do a little spying of my own and came to the same conclusion as my wife's best friend did. We decided to talk to our spouses separately because it was the easiest way. I asked my wife first if she had something to tell me. When she acted confused, I pressed her about having an affair and then dropped the bomb that I knew who she was having an affair with too. At first, she tried to say that her own best friend was just trying to break up her marriage and was jealous of what we had. I told her she thought her husband was having an affair with her as well. We both had suspicions and had enough circumstantial evidence, as you will, to make a case. Eventually, my wife admitted that it was the truth. She had been having an affair with her best friend's husband for the past year. I was floored by the confession because I couldn't believe it had been going on for a year, and I had no idea this was the case. I didn't talk to my wife for a week. There was no forgiving her, but I was in a state of shock. Once the shock wore off, I told her we were over. She seemed sad. However, I doubted it was genuine. When I checked in with my wife's best friend, she said she was also going through with a divorce. Her husband seemed almost happy. So, the two of us divorced our cheating spouses and let them be together. I ended up keeping the house in the divorce, as well as primary custody of our daughter. My ex-wife moved in with the ex-husband of her best friend, the same house they used to share. The best friend didn't care because she wanted nothing to do with him and needed a clean break. Even when she moved out of town, the two of us kept in contact with one another. It was safe to say we were becoming good friends. My ex-wife and her had no further contact with each other, which was for the best. I only talked to her about our daughter because I didn't want her in my life any more than she had to be. One might think that because my ex ended up married to her AP and had an instant house, things were great. No, that was not the case at all. She ended up having 2 more kids with the AP in 3 years. Turns out the best friend not having kids with him was a good idea because the AP did nothing to help with them. To make matters worse for her, he was cheating on her. My daughter only went over there every other weekend, so thankfully he wasn't exposed to that chaos a lot. Besides our daughter, I had no communication with her, but she did try to get me to help me out with her 2 kids, because she knew how good of a father I was to our daughter. These kids were nothing to me. They were hers and her AP's children. So I told her basically that it was her problem and she had to deal with it. Her former best friend thought this was hilarious when I told her. My ex was desperate, but she made her bed and it was time to lie in it.